World Wrestling Entertainment's Elimination Chamber match made its debut at the 2002 Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden. This new match type featured 6 Raw superstars locked inside a brand new structure, and the winner of the match would be awarded the World Heavyweight Championship. And just like most new match types that the WWE introduces via pay-per-view, many fans were intrigued and curious about how this match would play out. The first Elimination Chamber match was well received, spawning a series of chamber matches, and eventually the match type evolved into its very own pay-per-view. But today we're just going to focus on the first match, a match that went wrong in more ways than one, but yet it still turned out to be a great main event. This is the first ever Elimination Chamber match. It's 2002 and we're in the Ruthless Aggression era. Raw and Smackdown are competing against each other to see who can put on the best shows and who can attract the best talent. While Raw and Smackdown were obviously under the same WWE umbrella, there was actually a pretty real competition between the two brands behind the scenes, with each show having a separate team of writers and producers. The show's general managers, however, would have a much more typical rivalry where Raw's Eric Bischoff would be the heel, while SmackDown's Stephanie McMahon would be the babyface. Now, this wasn't always the case. There were plenty of times where Stephanie would turn heel for a few weeks, depending on the storyline, but you get the picture. Eric and Stephanie would feud just as much as the wrestlers they managed, and it made for pretty good TV. Many fans loved this era of WWE. Eric and Stephanie would try to one-up each other at every given opportunity, whether that be through the signing of new superstars, superstar defections, or booking main event matches that would take the shine away from the opposing brand. The Elimination Chamber, in storyline, was introduced by Eric Bischoff to counter SmackDown's Hell in a Cell match that took place at No Mercy the month prior. That match featured Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker. The cell match between Lesnar and Taker was good, and the brutality was turned up a few notches for the No Mercy main event, and so Eric wanted to give fans more at Survivor Series 2002. In storyline, it was Eric Bischoff who came up with the Elimination Chamber match, but in reality it was actually Triple H who developed the match type. In an article posted on WWE.com, Triple H said, "I'm the one who invented it. I drew a square cage and put 4 other squares in the corners, and I said, it's 6 guys, 2 start, and every few minutes another cage opens and 1 more guy enters the fight, and everyone fights until there's 1 guy left. I thought it could be interesting because if the superstars involved have issues, then there's intrigue." In typical WWE form, it was twice as big as I envisioned it and twice as elaborate. We don't do anything small, so I should have known better. When I stood in front of it for the first time, I thought, geez, please don't tell anybody this was my idea. Normally I would say here to take anything written on WWE.com with a pinch of salt, but Eric Bischoff was actually questioned about this on Twitter, and Eric confirmed it was indeed a Triple H creation. It was also reported that Triple H actually wanted to do War Games at Survivor Series 2002, but Vince McMahon shot down the idea. On TV though, this was all Eric's creation, a way for the Raw brand to one-up SmackDown. On the 21st of October episode of Raw, Eric Bischoff said, "That Hell in a Cell match between Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker, it was a spectacle, but it's gonna pale in comparison to the match I have in mind. You see, at Survivor Series, you're gonna witness an ingenious creation, one that could only come from the mind of Eric Bischoff. At Survivor Series, you will bear witness to the Elimination Chamber." Not a lot was given away here, but we found out a little more information the following week. Eric Bischoff said that the Survivor Series 2002 main event will feature 6 superstars from Monday Night Raw. The match will have elements of Survivor Series, the Royal Rumble, and War Games. The mentioning of War Games here really made me perk up, as it was a match I desperately wanted to see return after the WWE bought WCW. Eric says that this match will be for the World Heavyweight Championship, and that means World Champion Triple H will be part of this mystery matchup. Chris Jericho, Booker T, Rob Van Dam, Kane, and Shawn Michaels will also compete in the match. The addition of HBK was a shock, seeing as his SummerSlam 2002 return match was supposed to be a one and done deal. Shawn was given a week to make his decision. He had the option of not competing in the match if he didn't want to, but HBK confirmed the following week that he would take part in the first ever Elimination Chamber match. We would then see the Survivor Series commercials that showed us the blueprint for the Elimination Chamber, but we didn't see what the finished structure looked like. Fans would have to order Survivor Series on pay-per-view to see the finished Elimination Chamber steel cage. Even the wrestlers competing in the match wouldn't see the Elimination Chamber until the day of Survivor Series. When the WWE rolled up to Madison Square Garden on November 17th, 2002 though, the guys competing inside the Chamber match main event quickly noticed that this bout was going to be a lot of hard work. A WWE Magazine article from 2009 said that the Elimination Chamber was built in Colorado Springs. It took up to 8 weeks to build and it cost $250,000. 16 feet high, 36 feet in diameter, it weighs a total of 16 tons, 10 tons of steel and 6 tons of chain. While these are all very impressive numbers, it also tells us that this chamber structure was not gimmicked. This thing needed its own dedicated 50-foot flatbed truck for transportation, and it was stored off-site at a dock in Newark, New Jersey. The WWE had effectively created a monster with the Elimination Chamber, and the superstars involved in the match got concerned. There was no give here. This thing was going to hurt and there was no way around it. Chris Jericho said the following in an interview. "We didn't see it until the day of the show in Madison Square Garden, and it's one of those things you can tell was made by somebody who's not a wrestling person. It was very clunky, it was very dangerous. It's made of real graded steel. You probably could have made it out of rubber and you wouldn't have known the difference. The walls were very stiff and they didn't make any noise when you hit them, so it hurts like hell and it sounds like shit." Triple H said, "We saw it for the first time and we were like, oh god, who built this? It was the most horrible thing ever. It took us all day to figure out, like, how does this thing work? Everything hurt. It was just hard, rigid steel, even the chain walls. Everybody was like, oh yeah, but it's chain. Yeah, it's chain. It moved about half an inch and then it was like hitting a lumpy bag of bricks. We hadn't done much in the afternoon, we just talked a lot." Before we go any further, let's take a look at the match rules and why the Elimination Chamber was compared to the Royal Rumble match, a traditional Survivor Series match, and the War Games match. The Elimination Chamber would include multiple competitors inside the structure. 2 men would start the match while the other 4 were locked inside their own little pods. After 5 minutes, a new competitor drawn at random would enter the match, and that competitor would then be eligible for elimination. A superstar gets eliminated from the match via pinfall or submission, and the match ends when every superstar has entered the bout and every superstar has been eliminated except for one. The last man standing would be the winner of the Elimination Chamber. So you had the elimination aspects of the Royal Rumble in the Survivor Series, you had staggered entrance just like Royal Rumble and War Games, you have a giant cage sitting over the ring with multiple competitors fighting inside just like War Games, and the winner was the last man standing just like Survivor Series and the Royal Rumble matches. We should also quickly look at why these superstars were selected for the match in terms of storyline, and then we'll look at the match itself. Triple H is our champion, so of course he's going to be involved. Shawn Michaels beat Triple H in his return match at SummerSlam 2002, and the game attacked Shawn afterwards. Shawn wanted revenge, and as mentioned, he was given a choice. He could step into the Elimination Chamber to get his revenge, plus he could get a world title shot. Shawn accepted. The Big Red Machine Kane and Triple H had been feuding on TV, with both men having a main event match at the No Mercy pay-per-view. This spawned the infamous Katie Vick storyline and Triple H making a complete mockery of Kane's trouble past, so there's that. Chris Jericho at this time was a heel and also one half of the tag team champions along with Christian. The Elimination Chamber match needed more than just one heel and Jericho was a great performer, so it made sense. Rob Van Dam came close to winning the world title from Triple H back at Unforgiven in September, but thanks to Ric Flair and a sledgehammer, the game was able to leave the Staples Center still the world champion, so RVD also had some issues with Hunter. And Booker T was teaming up with Goldust around this time period, but he too was having issues with Triple H. To be fair, these issues were minor and they only really manifested after Booker was announced as a competitor in the Elimination Chamber, but still, Booker's a great choice because he's a great wrestler. 2 heels and 4 babyfaces though. So let's look at the match while also looking at a few comments made by the competitors. First of all, the Elimination Chamber looks incredible on TV. The WWE would change the design of this thing based on wrestler feedback, I assume, and logistics. The new chamber's a lot smaller and it has a much more forgiving floor area, but just look at this thing right here. If you're into cage matches, then this would have been a real treat to see on pay-per-view. The chamber has its own steel floor that's level with the ring, and this was only made apparent when the cage was lowered down for the main event. Eric Bischoff comes out before the match begins to talk about the match rules and to put over the dangers of the Elimination Chamber. The first 4 competitors who make their way down to the ring will be locked inside their own personal chamber or their own pod. The wrestler can watch what's going on through the bulletproof plexiglass surrounding their pod, but they can only enter when their pod door is opened up by a referee after a 5-minute interval. The last 2 competitors to make their entrances into this match will be the 2 men to start this thing off, meaning whoever comes into this thing last has an incredible advantage over everyone else. Entrant number 1 is Chris Jericho, and Chris had a very unique entrance here where Saliva sang King of My World from the WWE's The World venue in Times Square. Y2J made his way to the chamber while the band played his song off-site. Chris gets locked in, and then Booker T makes his entrance, meaning Chris and Booker will not be starting off the Elimination Chamber match. Kane then makes his entrance, and then HBK comes to the ring with a bad haircut and even worse ring gear. There's a story behind those tights though. HBK's gear designer didn't get the attire finished on time, and because Shawn's brown gear always gets brought up when people talk about this match, here's a little information from Shawn's book that explains the questionable attire HBK wore at Survivor Series. At SummerSlam, I wore jeans because it was a street fight. They didn't want me in jeans for this match. Julie Youngberg, our seamstress, suggested some earth tone tights. I figured why not, she had always made great outfits for me in the past. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to finish them. They were puke brown, and as I readied myself to go out for the match, Hunter looked at me with that "I can't believe you're going to go out there in those" look on his face. I turned to Rebecca, who's Shawn's wife, and said, "I feel stupid. Do I look like an idiot?" Stephanie and Hunter were trying not to laugh. Rebecca gave me a kiss and said, "You look great." HBK, Kane, Booker T and Jericho were locked in pods, meaning Triple H and Rob Van Dam would start the match off. It starts off as your typical wrestling match with back and forth action, but it doesn't take long for Hunter to get backdropped onto the chamber's floor, and the sound created here makes you quickly realise that that floor doesn't have any give at all.
5 men have got to be eliminated.
RVD then starts throwing Hunter into the chain wall repeatedly. Hunter throws his whole body weight into the chains and he manages to bust the door open. Triple H said he remembers those first few bumps he took at the chain wall and he remembered thinking to himself, "Oh my god." Shawn Michaels watches on as RVD performs a monkey flip onto the steel floor. Hunter has now been busted open and Hunter knows all too well what that cold steel feels like. RVD performs Rolling Thunder from the ring to the platform's steel floor, and Van Dam then decides he's going to try to eliminate Hunter with a 5-star frog splash from the top of Chris Jericho's pod. Jericho grabs RVD and we don't get to see the move. Van Dam instead hits a senton from the top rope to the outside of the ring, and Mr. Monday Night takes a hard bump here. RVD begins favouring the knee, but he makes it back inside the ropes where the match continues. We have reached the 5-minute mark, so a pod is gonna open up and a new competitor will enter the match. Chris Jericho's door opens and the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla instantly goes after RVD. This harkens back to War Games and how the heels would have an early advantage. The only difference here is the fact that RVD easily takes care of Chris. And we get to see this impressive crossbody where RVD grabbed onto the chain beforehand. This got a great pop from the Garden and things were going well for Rob Van Dam, but it doesn't take long for Triple H and Jericho to begin teaming up, and Van Dam takes a lot of punishment before the next entrant gets in the ring. RVD gets his back rammed into the chain wall over and over again and it looks brutal. This goes on for quite some time. Van Dam fights back inside the ropes and the crowd again gets behind him, but a DDT from the game puts an end to RVD's momentum. Booker T is the next guy in and he's all fired up. Have a look at this. I think he wanted to clothesline Jericho over the top rope, but Y2J almost gets his head taken off instead. Booker finds the time to pull off a spinneroonie, but he's forced to go toe-to-toe with RVD afterwards. Booker has no problem taking out Van Dam as the New York crowd goes nuts for the 5-time WCW champion. Booker does some work with all three men inside the ring, but it's Chris Jericho who takes him out. And while the ring's cleared out, RVD decides to try that frog splash again. Van Dam goes to the top of the pod, he pulls off the frog splash, and then disaster strikes for Triple H. RVD said, "I had to alter my 5-star frog splash because of the structure. When I looked down on him, I thought everything was going to be fine. I mean, I knew he was a little bit close, but I thought I'd just be able to drop right down on him." Triple H said, "Van Dam lands on my throat, completely crazy, random moment in time. He was at an awkward angle and he couldn't stand up straight. It seemed good when we put it together. He landed on my throat and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't speak. They sent a doctor into the ring who was talking to me through the grates, and I was like, do not stop this, I got it, but I couldn't talk." You can see Earl Hebner putting up the X symbol after the move, and you can also see Triple H trying to communicate with the doctor as Booker T and Chris Jericho try to keep the crowd distracted. Moments after the frog splash, Booker T eliminated RVD with a missile dropkick. There's even more panic afterwards though. Shawn Michaels was supposed to be the next man who entered the Elimination Chamber match, but the lights were on Kane after the 10-second countdown, so the next part of the match would have to be completely rewritten by the guys in the ring. These next 5 minutes would be completely called on the fly. Triple H said, "Jericho and I laugh about this all the time. I had just gotten hurt, Jericho didn't know it, and then they opened the wrong pod. Jericho rolled over to me and went, 'Oh my god, they opened the wrong pod.' I'm like, 'I'm hurt.' He's like, 'Oh my god.' He just freaked out. The worst possible scenario is happening at that moment." Reading Triple H's comments here and then going over to Chris Jericho's book is also quite funny, as Jericho writes about being a ring general and making sure everything goes according to plan. Chris wrote, "Hunter's larynx was damaged and he could barely talk. He was in immense pain, and when I rolled over to ask him if he was okay, he could only squawk that he wasn't. It was up to me to take charge. I bumped around for Rob and Booker until the clock started ticking down from 10, heralding Shawn's entrance into the match." HBK wrote in his book, "During the match, Kane was supposed to come out fourth, right before me. Well, the third light went on and his cage opened up, so he had to come out. At this point, I was out there with my Dutch boy haircut and my puke brown tights. The match was messing up and we didn't have a finish. Everything was falling apart and falling apart fast. Years ago, I probably would have gone nuts and started screaming at everyone, but I'd come a long way. I stood in my little cage and tried to make light of it, yelling, 'This isn't good at all.' I was actually having fun with the whole disaster." Kane made the most of his unexpected entrance by putting Jericho through a pod. Chris wrote in his book that both Kane and Pat Patterson shut down the idea of someone getting thrown through the, quote, "bulletproof plexiglass" because it was too dangerous. Fast forward to the match itself, and according to Chris's book, Kane was so pissed off about the match getting screwed up that he'd done a complete 180 and he happily put Chris through the pod, almost as if the wrong door getting opened was Chris's fault. Kane hits a chokeslam on Booker and Jericho recovers, delivering a great looking lion salt on Booker and eliminating the 5-time champ from the match. The next few minutes is all Jericho and Kane. Triple H is given time on the outside to try and recover, but credit to the game, he comes back every now and then to take a bump before rolling back out of the ring. HBK then comes into the match and he cleans house. This was what was supposed to happen 5 minutes ago. And then Kane shuts Shawn down with a clothesline. Again, this was what was supposed to happen when Kane entered the match. Shawn fights back, but Kane ends up completely dominating the match, hitting all three men with chokeslams. Triple H, Jericho and Shawn decide to work together in order to eliminate the Big Red Machine. Kane takes Sweet Chin Music, he gets nailed with a pedigree, and Chris Jericho hits a lion salt to take the Devil's Favourite Demon out of the match. Triple H is again given some recovery time as Jericho punishes Shawn, and HBK doesn't even try to hide the fact that he's bleeding, it's as clear as day. Hunter joins in for a bit, helping Jericho dish out some punishment, and the two heels work together as the Heartbreak Kid takes a beating at the chain wall. Triple H maybe thought he could handle it, but a few minutes later he has to stop again. Jericho tries to check on Hunter, but the game can't speak. Jericho and Shawn take on the brunt of the work again, with Jericho maintaining control. The moment Shawn takes the lead, Hunter comes over to take another bump. It's really fascinating watching these guys put this together after Triple H's injury and the botched match entrance order. And something that can't be overlooked here is just how professional everyone has been here. There was panic at first and Kane seemed to get annoyed, but if you watch this very casually, then you'd never know there were any problems. Shawn takes a backdrop on the steel floor, but he manages to get back in the ring before Jericho. Hunter tries to take advantage, but Shawn hits his flying forearm. Jericho then comes back in, he hits a bulldog before hitting Shawn with a lion salt, but Shawn kicks out. HBK then tries a moonsault and he even puts Y2J in the walls of Jericho, but Triple H makes the save. Hunter wants to keep this 2-on-1 advantage, it seems, but it's then made clear that Hunter actually wants to eliminate Shawn himself, and this leads to Jericho and Hunter fighting it out. Hunter's an absolute wreck here, but he still hangs in there with Jericho. Chris counters a pedigree and we see the walls. The crowd goes nuts as it looks like Triple H is about to tap out. But then Shawn hits Jericho with a super kick and Jericho is now out of the match. It's down to Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and Triple H is in serious need of medical attention. Hunter and Shawn trade right hands before Triple H lands a spinebuster. Shawn then gets dumped out of the ring and he slams hard on the Elimination Chamber's metal floor. HBK goes for a pedigree, but Hunter reverses it and Shawn goes through the plexiglass. Shawn and Hunter didn't seem to care as much as Kane and Jericho. Hunter tries to pin Shawn afterwards, but HBK kicks out. A fistfight breaks out between the two men, and it ends with Shawn taking a facebuster, and Shawn again gets dumped at the outside. Shawn counters a pedigree, this time it's Hunter who gets catapulted, and it looks like this will be Shawn's final chance to win this thing. Shawn climbs up to the top of a pod as Hunter gets ready to once again take another high-flying move from an unsafe distance. HBK makes sure his elbow drop only hits Triple H's midsection. It didn't look great, but it still got a good pop from the garden. Shawn then warms up the band, he goes for sweet chin music, but Triple H counters and we see the pedigree. Jim Ross says it's all over, but it takes Hunter a long time to cover Michaels. Shawn kicks out of two, New York goes nuts, and Triple H decides to go for a pedigree one more time to finish the match. Shawn counters with a backdrop, HBK runs to the corner. We then see the final move of the match. Shawn hits sweet chin music and HBK becomes the World Heavyweight Champion. Eric Bischoff promised brutality and the WWE were promoting this as a violent and unpredictable bout, but they never could have guessed what was going to happen inside the first ever Elimination Chamber match. Hunter's injury was a big problem, the botched entrance was another big problem, and then you have the unforgiving Elimination Chamber itself being a pretty big problem. Every competitor talked about how difficult it was to work inside this new steel structure. The outcome must have been sweet for HBK though. Shawn main evented the Garden back at Survivor Series 1996 and he got booed out of the building. In 2002 though, the fans went crazy for the match ending as confetti fell from the ceiling and HBK celebrated his big title win. A win that wasn't on the cards a few weeks prior. Jim Ross asks fans at home if they believe in miracles as the brutality of the Elimination Chamber turns into a big party to end Survivor Series 2002. It's a great way to finish the show, but backstage there were definitely a few injuries and a few guys questioning if doing the chamber was a wise decision. Hunter had to spend 24 hours in hospital afterwards. He said he wanted to leave and doctors told him that if he does so, his throat would likely swell up and he would likely choke. This made Hunter quickly change his mind and he stayed in. As mentioned earlier though, every competitor inside the first chamber match was a veteran. Things fell apart but they still managed to put it all back together, and thanks to how well received the first Elimination Chamber match was, the match type would become an annual bout. I'll leave you with a quote from Chris Jericho then before closing this video. Chris said, "It was all of this comedy of errors that you look back on and it's just like, holy shit, I can't believe it became what it became, because the first one technically was a disaster. We had to watch it back, I think this second year, to kind of remember what we did. I thought, hey, this actually turned out pretty good. Within the cage, whatever mistakes happen, nobody knows except for the guys. And that's kinda how it goes."